Who is this man and what is he doing? For the answer, stay tuned to Twits Pishers. Well, hello there, birding buddies, and welcome back for part 2 of our Trinidad birding adventure. I'll be birding here with my friend Nancy Barron from Canada. We'll be heading up into the mountains and down to the Caroni Swamp in search of the famous scarlet ibis. But before we do that, I've got to tell you about 2 more very common birds here around the Asa Wright Nature Centre that we didn't get time to look at last time around. The first are these little doves. That's the ruddy ground dove, and you may recognize that name. When that bird just barely gets into the southernmost U.S., it causes a great bit of excitement among birders. I prefer to see them down here where they're common, where they're right in the middle of their range, rather than up on the edge of their range where they're barely surviving, but that's just the kind of guy I am. Anyway, ruddy ground dove. The male is quite rusty ruddy colored. The female is quite gray. Just your average small, peaceful-looking dove. The other bird I have to show you, though, is this one down here, and they're all over the place. It's an absolute, very tropical-looking. That is the blue-crowned mott-mott. Mott-motts are distantly related to kingfishers, but they don't behave anything like kingfishers. These are, well, they're feeding on the fruit at the fruit trays that they put out here, and they're skulking around. They like to sort of, play it cool. They're very hunchy, skulky, shade-loving birds. I get a real kick out of them. And what an exotic tail. Mott-motts. Good name, too. Mott-mott. Mott-mott-mott. Three of the best birding spots in Trinidad are the Asa Wright Nature Centre in the Northern Range, the Caroni Swamp on the west coast, and the mountain road to Blanchisseuse. Before we head into the mountains, there are a few other species I need to show you. This is a cocoa thrush, Trinidad's answer to the American robin, and these are its newly fledged babies. And this is a bare-eyed thrush, appropriately named because there are no feathers around the eyes. Not that any birds have feathers right on the eyes. This is a great kiskadee, an odd type of flycatcher that will even visit the bird feeding tray and feed on bread. Bread and fruit are also attractive to the chestnut woodpecker, a huge crested woodpecker that is somewhat reminiscent of the North American pileated woodpecker, except for its stunning colors. And speaking of stunning colors, here's a close-up look at the crested oropendula, a bird we featured in our last episode. Up close you can even see its bright blue eyes. Okay, well now that we've covered these species, we can move up into the mountains and watch for birds along the road. We're on the road to Blanchisseuse. It's a mountain road, crosses the northern range in Trinidad, and we're with Roodal Ramlal, who is one of the finest birders and birding guides in the country. And we're trying to attract a colored trogon, is that right?
Yeah, colored trogon.
And there it is.
Up on the branch there?
Yep, you see it? That's an amazing bird because when it has its back to you and it's stationary, it just blends right in. How can something that electric green be camouflaged? And then it turns around and it just knocks your socks off with that absolutely spectacular red on the breast.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Is this a relatively common bird here?
Well, it's, as I said, it's like everything else, It's widely spread. It's sometimes very difficult to find. So you should consider yourself very lucky finding this at this range here.
Huh. Look how it's pumping its tail. Apparently that's sort of come-on behavior for the females.
You know anything about the nesting habits of this?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, real estate's always a problem in the tropics because there's so many birds always trying to find a home. And so what they've done is they've found a way of taking advantage of another animal. They actually burrow into termite nests. They'll take an old abandoned termite nest, dig a hole in, and call that home, raise their family.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You ever seen that, Roodal?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's just first rate. What's the small bird that we're seeing flitting around in here? Is that a warbler?
A golden crown warbler.
Another bonus. Very good, very good. Well, I'm really starting to like this road to Blanchisseuse. Superb spot. 300 and some switchbacks on it.
And counting.
We also got a look at a female collared trogon, a less colorful bird than the male, but still very attractive. In typical trogon fashion, it was sitting perfectly still while slowly scanning the forest around it for food and for enemies. There are two other species of trogons in Trinidad, the violaceous, shown here with its blue back to us, and the white-tailed. This male white-tailed was showing us its bright yellow belly while giving forth with its ventriloquial call, barely opening its bill while making the sound. In the American tropics, most of the best birding is found along the mountain roads, where one should always be on the lookout for drivers coming around blind corners. The road to Blanchisseuse, by the way, is a destination in and of itself, and we never did get to the coastal town of Blanchisseuse. Instead, we watched such birds as the violaceous euphonia, a sort of small tanager with bright colors on the male and a forest green plumage on the female. We were there in February, in the beginning of the dry season, when many species such as this golden olive woodpecker were beginning to nest. This was one of my favorite Trinidad birds, the yellow oriole. And here is a rare one, the brown violet ear, a type of hummingbird that only descends from the mountaintops when the immortelle trees are in bloom. But for sheer rainforest classics, you can't beat toucans, and we got great looks at this channel-billed toucan, the only species in Trinidad. Despite their strange build, these are agile birds, and they are big birds too. The huge bill is used mostly to gather fruit, but toucans are not above a bit of carnivory, and small animals sometimes fall prey to these flamboyant omnivores. And speaking of omnivores, the great consumers of the rainforest are surely the army ants. Nancy and I were lucky enough to come upon a raiding column carrying bits of chopped up insect back to their bivouac. Large workers carried the booty, small workers did most of the hunting, and long-jawed soldiers guarded the procession. Some workers even built bridges with their own interlocked bodies. An entomologist's dream, but not a sight for the faint of heart. Well, it looks like this army ant raid is just about over. They're all going one direction now. And it's always nice to see army ants. It's also a good birding opportunity.
Yeah, I know. If you can tear your eyes away from watching this river of life, you often find that there's all sorts of things flitting through. Oh, there's the buff-throated wood creeper.
Well, you're pretty good at these.
Well, I've had a week on you here.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
It's a beauty. It's got a longer bill, decurved, and nice specks on the head.
That's a nifty bird.
Oh, that's
Excellent.
nice. Excellent view. Excellent view. Oh, that's nice. Over there, there's the plain brown wood creeper. Now, there's another ant bird that's usually found in association with these army ants.
It's a nice looking bird, but it is quite plain brown, isn't it?
Yeah. All these
How about
ant
that?
birds are super dull because they're all living quite close to the ground, so they don't want much light on them. Plus, they're all eating insects. And one of the things I always thought that ant birds eat ants.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Not the case.
No, not the case. I was really surprised. Were you surprised when you found that out?
Yeah, I was too. Yeah, that they're actually eating the insects of the ant column scares up.
Yeah, not
And it's-
ants at all.
yeah.
Well, some of them eat ants, but it's more of a byproduct of what the ants are stirring up, and so they're all going after them at different levels and sort of focusing on different things. Like that plain brown wood creeper tends to be close to the ground.
And that's a classic ant-following bird.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, there's all those other ones that have got the ant attached to their name.
Well, I thought I
which is a
saw
good
an ant
clue.
wren here, but I've never seen one before,
Yeah,
so I wasn't sure.
Oh, well, we do have an ant tanager. It's the
Ant-
female. It's the
Mhm.
red-crowned ant tanager.
With no red crown,
With
but
no red crown
I'll
at all.
believe you
She's
anyway.
golden olive.
This is just overwhelming.
I know, it's unbelievable.
Never rains, but it pours in the old rainforest. How about that? We continued to watch the column of ants accompanied by some insects like this net-winged beetle that seem to have some immunity from their attacks. Others, like this scarab beetle, have to flee to survive, and these are the ones that feed the ant birds. We found other species like this female barred antshrike and its black and white partner. Our most shocking find, however, was this male great antshrike carrying the body of a copper-rumped hummingbird. We can only assume that the antshrike killed the hummer, although all of the references we checked indicate that this is a rare event, possibly the first documented occurrence of this sort of predation. Nearby, with the immortelle trees in full bloom, a more conventional bird of prey was waiting for us. Well, what do you think of that? A couple of episodes ago, I boldly suggested that we might see a bat falcon when we got to Trinidad. And there you go, a bat falcon. Now, isn't that a handsome bird? A lot of people compare it to peregrine, say it's like a small peregrine because it has that very dark hooded look. But it's not like a peregrine at all. This is a falcon that hunts mostly at dawn and at dusk, and it specializes on catching bats, as well as the occasional small bird and large insect. But there's lots of things trying to eat birds here, so why not go after bats instead? That's a very interesting falcon. Little falcon, but a very, very, very impressive falcon. Little raptor optimism pays off. The bat falcon was only one of the raptors we encountered on our trip to Trinidad. The most common species was probably the ferruginous pygmy owl, a bird we heard each day but saw only occasionally. This bird is the double-toothed kite, a small raptor somewhat reminiscent of the sharp-shinned hawk. A relative, this gray-headed kite, was performing a flutter glide display when we saw it. Our rarest sighting was a king vulture, high overhead the Arima Valley. Of course, I was just as happy to see this common blackhawk, an impressive-looking raptor that spends most of its hunting time walking along small creeks looking for land crabs. And how about this one, the ornate hawk eagle, a huge crested bird that we saw on its enormous stick nest high in a rainforest tree. A wonderful sight, anywhere, anytime. Well, you know, I must admit your first trip to the tropics can be a bit daunting after you've gotten your inoculations and so on, and a lot of people, they figure they're for sure going to get some sort of terrible tropical disease. But the fact is, here in Trinidad at the Asa Wright Centre, it's not that bad. I mean, you can more or less trust the water, you can more or less trust the food, and a sighting of a poisonous snake is, for most naturalists, a cause for celebration. It's a rare event. I haven't seen one myself. The one thing, though, I should warn you about is chiggers. They're little mites, They give you very itchy bites. They don't cause anything other than itching, but the itching can be quite severe. The trick is get yourself some high-top canvas runners or some military surplus jungle boots. Tuck your pants into your socks and douse the whole thing with DEET-type insect repellent. You should also definitely stay out of the grass, especially long grass. Chiggers like it in the grass. I haven't gotten a single chigger bite yet myself. Touch wood. Actually, I guess you shouldn't touch that much wood. There's quite a few stinging ants here, but nothing that's going to really kill you. Well, I was really kind of hoping we'd see this bird. Now, is that the female or the male rufous-tailed jacamar?
Well, the male's got that nice, white, clean chin, and the female's all rufous underneath. She's solid iridescence. I think she's way better looking myself.
She is a lovely bird. Absolutely. Very iridescent, too.
Yeah.
Very iridescent.
And again, when they're in the shadow, they completely turn black. But when they sit on the edge of a little piece of sunlight like this, it's just like the light turns on. They just hit your eyes.
Is this pretty typical habitat for these jacamars? Out on a perch like that, behaving like a flycatcher?
Yeah, it's perfect. They like to be in a place where they can make sallies out into the sunlight, where they watch for bugs. And they like to also have a nice little chunk of bank nearby, too, where they live.
Oh, she's got something there, too.
Oh, look at her, look at her. Food prep, eh? Look how they don't just gulp down their
it
bug.
on the branch.
They just whack it. Why do they do that?
My understanding is that they're trying to kill whatever it is that they're going to eat, and they're related to kingfishers.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
When
they're
you got
related to
bug that
kingfishers,
size.
and kingfishers do that, especially
Yeah.
the land kingfishers.
Uh-huh.
But also they're going to bash the wings off their food if it's an insect, and a lot of the butterflies, especially here, the colorful ones, have toxins in the wings. So if you get the
Oh.
wings off, you've got a more digestible meal.
Makes sense.
How do they use that same bill, that long, thin bill, to excavate their nests in a bank? That's what I'd like to know. I don't get it.
Well, I can see that working as a nice little pickaxe. You know, find yourself a nice piece of clay and just, you know.
Like these little holes up here, maybe?
Yeah. It's hard to believe that something with a tail like that would actually want to live in a burrow, though. You'd think you'd get a lot of dirt in your feathers.
No, they must take it like one sand grain at a time. I wonder if they can turn around in the end of the burrow, or whether they have to back out, or...
I don't know. Those burrows aren't much bigger than they are.
Yeah.
But it makes sense here because there's such a problem with predators, and it'd be really tough for a snake to wiggle down that sheer cliff, or just about anything else to get in there. So I can see how it would be fairly predator-proof.
Is this down the hill here? Is that the male?
Oh
with
yeah,
the white throat?
look at him. He's lovely, isn't he? You know, it's always a good bet. When you see one jacamar, you'll usually see another because they have a year-round relationship that goes on year after year. So you almost always find them in pairs like this.
This is really... I really like it when you get more than just a glimpse of the bird. You can get a feel for its whole story. I think we've really lucked out with these jacamars.
Jacamar finane.
What's that mean, anyway?
I don't know, it's a song.
There you go. I gotta tell you, I'm having a good time, and these boots are really comfortable too.
I'm gonna get a pair just like them, John.
Don't blame you. All right, let's leave the rainforest for a moment and journey down into the lowlands and the ever-popular birding spot, the local sewage lagoon. Now, admittedly, this is one of those relatively pleasant sewage lagoons, and Nancy and I were immediately attracted to the yellow-hooded blackbirds. This bird looks like a North American yellow-headed blackbird, but is more closely related to the red-winged blackbird. In other words, either the yellow-headed pattern evolved twice, or the ancestor of the red-winged blackbird looked like a yellow-headed blackbird, if you follow my drift. Now, here's a neat flycatcher, the pied water tyrant. This attractively patterned bird was easy to approach and seemed completely preoccupied with catching insects on mats of floating vegetation. It's called a tyrant because it belongs to the tyrant flycatcher family, not because it is particularly tyrannical. There were also a few shorebirds at the lagoon, and my favorites were the southern lapwings. And how about this critter, the wattled jacana? jacanas have extremely long toes that they use to walk around on top of floating plants. They don't need floating plants, mind you, and they sometimes behave like shorebirds. These ones seemed oblivious to the presence of a few caimans in the lagoon, but you can bet that both creatures realized the other was near. We were surprised when this caiman caught something, but we just couldn't tell what the unfortunate prey item was. The jacana didn't really seem to care. The final destination on our birding tour of Trinidad was the famous Caroni Swamp. Here, while waiting for our boat tour, I stopped to photograph some anableps, the remarkable four-eyed fish, a creature with a divided pupil so that it can look both below the water and above simultaneously, always on the alert for enemies in either direction. Once underway, we cruised the mangrove swamps, watching for birds. Guide pointed out this greater Annie, a yellow-eyed, big-billed weirdo that was obviously watching us too. Another beauty was the red-capped cardinal, one of the typical red-headed cardinals of South America. The mangroves have their own special fauna of birds and other creatures associated with them, the second most popular of which is probably the common patu, a nocturnal bird that is almost always heard and not seen. And as for the most popular species, we arrived at the lookout point just before sunset, ready to watch for the arrival of the scarlet ibis as they flew in from elsewhere in the swamp and from nearby Venezuela. These brilliant red birds get their color from the crustaceans they eat, and when they fly in by the thousands to cover the mangrove heads, it is truly one of the great spectacles of the bird watcher's world. Hey, did you ever see a sleeping bird before? Nobody sees sleeping birds. This puffed up bird here is kind of irregular. People come out and look for it with their flashlights every night. I think it's a female great antshrike. It's all puffed up, doesn't seem to notice us. It's a tourist attraction. Go figure. Here is our list for this episode, and an all-time record high for us. Almost enough to push us over the 500 mark on our first 2 seasons. Still, numbers aren't everything, but if you want to see a lot of tropical birds up close, I can't think of a better place to do it than Trinidad. Well, it's not going to be easy to go back to the dear old frozen north after this experience, but I'm even more convinced than ever that if you want a perfect introduction to birding in the neotropical rainforest, this is it. Trinidad, the Asa Wright Nature Centre, places around. Great indeed. But wherever you go, I wish you happy birding. Keep your binoculars clean. Study your field guide. Remember to watch them after you identify them. Happy trails. Bye for now. Hasta mañana. Arrivederci. Adieu. All right.